What's good, everybody? Welcome to the Dead End Sports MLB recap. My apologies for getting this out a little late. I was on work assignment last week, and this week work's been kicking my butt. So trying to find time to get this video up and recorded has been a challenge. So my apologies. Y'all know how it is, man. You got to pay the bills and you got to take care of business sometimes. So, sometimes those things get in the way, but I'm back here with another MLB recap. As always, before we get into it, make sure you like this video and also subscribe to all things Dead End Sports and tune in each and every Tuesday night at 9:30 Eastern for the live Dead End Sports show right here on YouTube and Dead End Sports. All right. Well, this week's video, I wanted to focus on the MLB trade deadline, specifically, four teams that I feel like are going to be big conversation pieces when it comes to the MLB trade deadline. We're into trade season. So, there's a lot of discussions already about, which teams are buyers, which teams are sellers, which big market disappointing teams, i.e. the Mets, are they going to sell? Are they going to buy? Are they going to stay the same? Which, small market team that has a chance, are they going to buy? Are they going to sell? Are they going to punt? Are they going to stay the same? So there's a lot of conversation going on right now about, the MLB trade deadline. And I wanted to focus on these four teams because these are four teams that, to me, I think control the conversation going into August 1st. And I think these are teams that are interesting because, they've kind of come out of nowhere. They're having big time seasons for them, and they're in a situation where they can win their division or make the postseason for the first time in a long while. So are they going to make those big moves to edify their teams? Are they going to make the big move that elevates them from a possible playoff team to a definite playoff team, from a definite playoff team to, oh shit, this team has an opportunity to win a championship? The four teams are the Marlins, the Diamondbacks, the Reds, and the Orioles. Let's start with the Marlins. The Marlins, to me, have surprised a lot of people. They didn't really surprise me. I kind of felt like the Marlins were a dangerous team going into the year. I always kind of felt, I've always believed in the Marlins pitching talent. I think they've got an immense pitching depth. Just think of this, right? The Marlins' best pitcher and the reigning Cy Young Award winner, Sandy Alcantara, has an ERA over 4. Like he's not even had his best season. And the Marlins are 12 games over 500, 6.5 out of first place, and in the lead for the first wild card spot. So the Marlins have had a tremendous year, and I thought that they would be a dangerous team. But obviously, predicting and something coming to fruition is a big difference. So the Marlins are having a really good year, but the issue with the Marlins is always the same thing: their offense. Now, listen, they made a big trade in the offseason to acquire Luis Arraez, and he's having a historic season. He has an opportunity to hit for 400. I think he's at like 396, 397, something like that last check. He's been at 400 or over at times this season. I think right now he is the leading candidate to be the National League MVP. So, and they're getting big seasons out of Jorge Soler. They're getting some contribution, they're getting Jazz Chisholm back. So their offense is better than expected and better than it's been, but it's still not great. It still can use another bat or two. If you're the Marlins, are you going to go out and make that move? Are you going to, let me play out a scenario. Let's say the Mets continue to be a dumpster fire like they've been all year. And they decide, okay, you know what? We're not going to necessarily tear it down, but we're going to see which one of our assets can get us something in return. If you're the Marlins, do you call up the Mets and say, yo, Starling Marte, he's a guy that we've had interest in the past. We've had in the past. What if you guys pay 75% of that contract? He's got 2 years left. Is that a deal that could work? And we maybe give you 2 pitching prospects. I think the Mets would listen to that deal. If they're out of it, I think the Mets would definitely listen to that deal. An opportunity to get 2 young, controllable pitching aspects from the Marlins who have a dearth of pitching. I think that the Mets would listen to that deal. Would they do it? I don't know. Would the Marlins do it is the big question, though. Would the Marlins do that? Would they pay that price and say, you know what, for 2 years of Starling Marte, a guy that can impact our lineup, who has speed, who has pop, who we can put in the top of the order, along with Jazz Chisholm? I think the Marlins would consider that deal, but would they? Who knows? I think that's a big question. You look at the Diamondbacks, a team that has surprised a lot of people. I know a lot of people were kind of high on the Diamondbacks going into the season. I didn't see it, but I know a lot of people were. And, the Diamondbacks, have the second best record in the National League. Who would have thought? They're in first place. They're in, they're only up 2.5 games on the Giants and 3 on the Dodgers. So it's not like they're running away with the division. But if you're the Diamondbacks, do you make a big time move to edify your team? The Diamondbacks have pretty good pitching, a pretty good bullpen, But, do they go out and double down on their pitching, or do they add another bat? I think they need another bat in that lineup, me personally. They got a lot of young players that are kind of having big time years, young, exciting, athletic players. Do they go out and maybe add a veteran bat at the deadline? I don't know, maybe a Salvador Perez, from the Royals. They don't really need a catcher, but, maybe that's a position that they can kind of upgrade, at the catching position. Do they add a Salvador Perez if the Royals decide to make him available? Do they try to poach a bat from the Rockies? How about this one? The Cardinals are in the dumps right now. If the Cardinals decide to punt on this year, Paul Goldschmidt's a free agent at the end of the year. Do the Diamondbacks look for a reunion with their former franchise player and Paul Goldschmidt? It's not crazy to think they could put Paul Goldschmidt at first base, move Christian Walker to DH, or vice versa. Like, there's a lot of moves that the Diamondbacks can make, but if you're the Diamondbacks, and that's the other thing you got to remember about with these teams, right? You're in a situation where, this isn't guaranteed. You're not going to be in these situations every year. If you're the Diamondbacks, if you're the Marlins, if you're the Cincinnati Reds and the Baltimore Orioles, you're not in a situation where this is guaranteed every year. You're not the Yankees, you're not the Astros, you're not the Dodgers, normally the Mets or whatever, or the Phillies, where you've got an endless supply of money and payroll flexibility to necessarily make these kind of moves on a year in, year out basis. You're close right now. So do you strike while the iron's hot? You're in a weak, I think the league is weak this year. Outside of the Braves, there's no real dominant team. So if you're the Diamondbacks, why not us? In the American League, I think it's wide open, the American League. The Astros are kind of a bit down right now. If you're the Orioles, why don't you double down and say, definitely, I'm going to go for it. So that's the thinking I have, and I think these organizations should have when they're making these decisions. I know we talked about the Marlins and we talked about the Diamondbacks, but about the Baltimore Orioles. The Baltimore Orioles are in second place. They're fighting the Tampa Bay Rays for neck and neck for, the AL East. So if you're the Orioles, to me, I think the Orioles need pitching. Their pitching is not that great. Their bullpen's pretty good. Their offense is good, but I think they need another starter in that rotation. I don't know if they necessarily call the Mets for a Verlander or a Scherzer. I think that might be a little bit too steep of their price. I mean, just think about it. Both Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander combined salaries make more than the Orioles payroll. So I don't think they're going to go in that route. I think they should, but I don't think they're going to go in that route. But if you're the Orioles, do you call the Cubs and say, what would it take for us to get Marcus Stroman? Probably one of the leading candidates for NL Cy Young, having a big time year, a free agent at the end of the year. Do they go all in on a rental of Marcus Stroman and say, listen, Marcus Stroman at the top of our rotation could help us out come October? Do they make that call? Do they make a call for another team and try to get another pitcher, maybe a younger, more controllable pitcher, and maybe, trade some of their assets that they have and get a young, controllable pitcher back? I don't know. Maybe do they call the Brewers? If the Brewers decide, we're not in it, do they call the Brewers for a Corbin Burns or a Peralta or a Brandon Woodruff? I know he's hurt right now. I don't think the Brewers would do that, but do they actually call? Do the Brewers consider it? They did trade Hader last year, so maybe the Brewers may consider, listen, let's recoup some prospects, let's trade one of our assets, and let's go there. I think that's a question that I think could be asked too. So what the Orioles do is going to be important, and I think the final team is the Cincinnati Reds. Now, I think this team, I don't know about this team. I know they had a 12-game winning streak and they're in first place right now, but I don't believe that the Reds are going to win this division necessarily, but who knows? Why not the Reds? The Pirates were hot a couple weeks ago. They looked like they were going to have a magical year. Then they kind of fell apart. The Reds are right there right now. Who knows? Maybe the Reds hang on and win this division. This division by far is probably the worst division in baseball right now. So why not the Reds? If you're the Reds, they've got a pretty good young dynamic offense. They're pitching while young and has high upside. They need another starter. They need another veteran. Do they call the Cubs in their division and get a Marcus Stroman? Do they call the Brewers and say, hey, what would it take for us to get a Corbin Burns or a Peralta or a Woodruff? Do they do that? Do they even do something big like call the Mets and say, what would it take for us to get Max? I don't think that's likely. I don't think both Scherzer and Verlander have no trade clauses, and I don't think they'll go to Cincinnati. But, the point is, are they going to make the call to get a big-time starting pitcher? That's an interesting question to ask. I think if you're Cincinnati, I think you absolutely have to go all in. You're Cincinnati, you're in a weak division, and you're not in this opportunity every year, so you go for it. The main crux is if you're one of these small market or mid market teams, you got to go for it because you never know when you'll have this opportunity again. I can't worry about next year and a prospect down the line necessarily. And I'm not necessarily saying mortgage your future, trade your top prospects, but make a choice of like, listen, we're going to go all in because we're not guaranteed this next year or the year after. We're in a situation where we've got an opportunity to make the postseason and make noise in the postseason. Let's edify this team. Let's make some moves to secure our postseason spot. So it's going to be very interesting what these four teams do at the MLB trade deadline. Like I said, the MLB trade deadline is August 1st. We still got a whole month plus the All-Star break to go. I'm sure some teams will jockey for positions. Some teams that we look at now as sellers might end up creeping their way back up into buyer mode. Some teams that we look at as buyers now may have a rough July, and they may end up sellers on August 1st. A lot of things can change in a month, so we'll definitely see. All right, that's it for me. As always, man, make sure you go like this video, subscribe to All Things Dead in Sports. I'm your man, Manny Brown, and I'm out of here. Peace.